Thank you very much, Bushra. I was really struck there by the, the way that a map, often a very simple map, can be kind of desecrated in a way, by drawing all over it, and that's quite a healthy thing in some ways, that it can be singularized in that very, very personal and very, very material kind of way. I think we should move straight on to Otobong because for time considerations, and we'll have the questions at the end.
Okay, I don't know how much time we've got. Okay, I'll be fast. Hello, my name is Otobong Nkanga. I come from Nigeria and I studied in Paris and did a residency at the Rijksacademy in visual arts and also a master's in theater and dramaturgy performances. So my work actually goes from one field to another and delving into specific aspects of architecture, landscape mapping, memory, displacement. So here I've decided to show you about 5 works, and I'll be quite precise and fast with it because we haven't got much time. So I will start with a few of drawings that are shown here. The way I work is also linked with a certain kind of narrative, which is linked with aspects that have influenced my life as a child and the kind of connections that have been made within living in a certain context, which was in Lagos, Nigeria, as moving to Paris and looking at my continent or looking at my country from another distance. And also from the learning of like different aspects of landscaping and dividing, because as we all know, like Africa, there was a kind of scramble for land from different kinds of colony. And so in that sense, it's also reflecting on this land that has been cut and divided. Even though we might speak the same language, we all of a sudden are divided, and it's one part is owned by the French and another part is owned by the English, or it's owned by what other country that went in there. So this work, which is called The Limits of Mapping, is a drawing that actually shows this demarcation and division of space and land, and also shows like the points going through them. When I make like arrows or points in drawings, I have like different, my own personal symbols and ways of like putting a meaning into the drawing. These points are more like demarcation of the land, of like, if we have a war and there's a whole table here, we have a stick to point at different points. But at the same time, there's no real interaction between wanting to know what the people want, what do they want, but it's more or less what we want from them. So this talks about a certain kind of limit that we have within this aspect of mapping or choosing to pick something from somewhere. And so in that way, it also relates in a way to the works that I showed here, which is Delta Stories, but I'll come to that later. So I'll show just, this work is called The Fight for Land. And these are 2 drawings. Each page is 29 centimeters by 42. And it shows 2 people from the same area fighting for the same land. But at the same time, the rope is too long and they'll never win. So it's also talking about this kind of wars we have, that we keep on fighting for something, but we never kind of win it in a way, because there's always it's always a struggle. So that talks about it in that sense. So a lot of my drawings, like for example, this series of drawings, like so, it's called Social Consequences. They, last year I made 40 of these drawings, which talk about these issues about land, war, and also about personal quest for heritage, land, and how we go about that. But here I've just decided to show 2. At the same time, there was this year, 2010, from that work of the drawings, I decided to make an installation piece, which is a kind of table that is also in a way very physical. As the spectator walks around the table, you also get that pointed sharp pointed part of the wood also pointing at the spectator. So it's not only something that we press into a like map and look at something and choose, but we also get a cause and effect. So whatever we do, also we get a kind of point also pointing back at us, because we have to deal with all the consequences that come with that. So this was an installation, a sculptural piece of about 2 meters by 1.50 meters. So. Okay, then from there I go on to another drawing called Spots of Amnesia, which is virtually a kind of a map, but at the same time having this white spots placed in between the spaces also shows a kind of erasure of the space. And sometimes when we look at certain spots that we want to look at, like army base areas, how they are erased. And from the, like when we look at Google Maps, how these things are also erased, and how certain aspects of history or certain aspects of reality are also erased. So this work is talking about this kind of amnesia and forgetting, and not only with the aspects of the map, but also with the aspects of history, how we can forget certain things that have been done or has happened, and how, yeah, that in a way leaves a kind of trace also on the map. And from there, I will move on to another way in which I map works, or I map spaces. I would go to Arrested Moments. This was a work that I did in the Canary Islands, the islands of Fuerteventura, which was actually most of the islands, the Canary Islands were built volcanic islands. And this island, when I got there, I decided the island was completely overwhelming. The mountains are so huge, everything is really, you feel like nothing in between all this space. And so I decided to make a performance for 3 days in which I sat on this old military house that was there since the 17th century and take pictures of 3 specific points, which one point is the mountain. It was a perfect mountain with a very sharp peak, the lonely palm tree, and the old house, which was where the workers used to live and work for the military officers that lived in this house. And so for 3 days, I decided to document in a way the changing landscape, and in a way mapping time and mapping how things shift. Because when we go through this mountain, we feel like everything is at a standstill. And nothing, I mean, when it comes to that like, landscape, that nothing is actually changing. So it was a way of like actually getting close to this landscape and mapping and feeling what are the changes that could go through, what are the feelings that I could have in this space. So during this time, the images were taken about every 15 to 30 minutes of the 3 different spots, the same different angles. And at the end of the 3rd day, it was the opening where people came for the opening of the exhibition. And all these images were printed out as a postcard. There were about 340 images, and each person that came were supposed to stand there, or they came and they, of course, were overwhelmed by this landscape and just looked at it at the same way as I fell in love with this landscape. And they could then choose which image they could identify with the landscape. And the amazing thing was that everybody was actually looking through the images and like really looking for the one that they could feel, this is the point, this is it. And the title of this work is called, it's a long title, Arresting the Moment Before the State of Amnesia Crops In.